Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration, day 9 of Spawnmas, as Rocky and I count down the first 12 issues of Spawn. And man, I got to tell you, going from Alan Moore to Neil Gaiman, I think the next issue is Dave Sim. I forgot a lot about these early issues. You know, we've talked about how they hold up a lot better than we thought they did, but I forgot how much Moore and Gaiman add to the mythos. And again, I gotta wonder, how much did McFarlane, did he just tell them, "Hey, I want to build up the mythos of Spawn," or did he, were these his ideas that they executed? So interesting, and I'm very curious. One thing I do want to correct from last issue before we go any further, though, we did talk about the little girl Jessica who cracked open, and I said mistakenly that it was Violator, the demon sort of half brother of Spawn that we'd seen in the previous issue. That was wrong. It was Vindicator, who's a brother of Violator.
That's right.
That's why he looked a little different, looked a little more insect-like or whatever. So that was totally my mistake. Assuming it was Violator, it's Vindicator. Again, there's 5 of them in total. But yeah, this is a good issue. That Neil Gaiman, he's a pretty good writer.
Well, it is. And, it's funny because you alluded to it. You sort of almost asked a rhetorical question. Whose idea was it? Was it McFarlane? Was it Gaiman? It should be noted, a little bit of comic book history. There was a lawsuit that arose from this issue over the creation of Angela. And I guess Angela, of course, being a sort of an assassin who kills Hellspawn in preparation and as a prep to sort of destroy the army of Malabrosia before that I guess Armageddon occurs. And it's interesting that it took many years for the lawsuit to resolve itself, but it is an open question. I've never actually read a transcript of the trial, but I'd be kind of curious to know. I'm sure McFarlane and Gaiman, because like you said, Angela is a key part of this Spawn mythology. And you got to wonder what was the extent of their collaborations early on, and if their stories changed over the years. I'm not really sure. I know what the outcome of the lawsuit was, and it was in Gaiman's favor in terms of ownership on Angela, and Angela ultimately ended up being owned by Neil Gaiman. Ultimately ended up selling Angela to Marvel Comics, where she I think she even had her own series for a while at Marvel a couple of years ago. But in any event, yeah. So let's get into this issue. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I'm not even necessarily talking about Angela herself. Obviously, she's part of the Warriors of Heaven, this coming war, that Malabulgia is talking about between heaven and hell. And yeah, you wonder about, okay, well, I mean, it's still McFarlane's comic. Like, he owns it. He owns the characters. He owns the world. But he must have given some sort of deal to Gaiman, and probably in order to get him to do it, to say he was going to retain some rights. And it wasn't until years later, after this comic book came out, that I mean, the speculation I've seen is that McFarlane didn't want to pay royalties anymore. Like, yeah, you just wonder. But basically, they ended up kind of settling. McFarlane did have to pay a sum of money. But in terms of creators, yeah, so he gave Gaiman the Angela rights. There's Rocky's waving it there, the toy. But in return, he held on to the medieval Spawn rights. So he owned everything Spawn. But I'm not even necessarily talking about what did Gaiman come up with, what did McFarlane come up with in terms of the characters, but I'm even more talking about the fact that there are other hellspawns. I mean, as we go through the issue, again, written by Neil Gaiman, art by Todd McFarlane, letters by Tom Orzechowski, colors by Steve Oliff and Ruben Rude. We see that Angela is there, and she's in disguise. And there's all these in a scroll text. It's a very, very good job of lettering. We see all this information. Like, this is how you identify a Spawn. This is what their characteristics are. And then we see medieval Spawn for the first time. And again, we don't even know who's narrating at this point. Here's the hunting methods. Young hellspawns make the best sport, and here's why. It talks about them being time disoriented. They've been sort of held in stasis for 5 to 10 years, which is exactly what we see with Al Simmons. Young hellspawn are confused. They tend to respond to good or noble impulses. This can be exploited by an experienced hunter. So there's all this information, there's all this lore and mythos that's being added that really paints a picture of a much bigger world than, this isn't just, hey, Al Simmons has these powers. It's a whole world, it's a whole universe that is being built here. And so that's what I'm wondering when I say, how much did Gaiman create? How much did McFarlane have input on it? And it does show at several times Gaiman's background and prose, because in some of these scroll text we do get quite a bit of information, and it's kind of wordy. Certainly not expositional the way McFarlane is. It's more informational. So anyway, this Angela, she's in disguise. She convinces this medieval spawn, this spawn from the before time, that her sister was captured by this ogre, and she leads him to this waterfall. There's a cave behind. They go inside, and then talks about hunting methods and how the best way to hunt a spawn is to sort of take them by surprise. And at that point, she transforms. He says, "What magic is this?" And her response is, "It's not magic. It's basically the war between heaven and hell." She talks about the carapace, how in some cases the carapace may be, that sort of parasite that bonds to them, like we saw last issue with Billy Kincaid. That can be more wily and vicious than the actual person that it's bonded to, because it's got more experience. So we see Angela defeat this young hellspawn, and we're told about how the most important thing is the lance, and once it's activated, it sends the spawn back to its home existence, basically. The way Gaiman puts it is, once activated, it sets up a dimensional resonance that will lance the hellspawn from this level of existence like pus from a boil. So not exactly the nicest visual imagery there. And then after we see that she's defeated this hellspawn and the carapace, we jump forward 800 years to the now time. And we find out that, excuse me, in this alley where Spawn's been hiding out, people have been asking for him, but all of his homeless buddies are covering for him, saying that they haven't seen him or making up outlandish stories. So Spawn thanks him for that. And then another guy kind of comes up out of nowhere and says, "Hey, what do you say, Spawn? You think you could create us a crate of strawberry ripple wine?" And he's like, "I'm not sure I can use my powers like that." And this guy's convinced. So he's like, "Just close your eyes and concentrate. I'm sure you'll be able to do it." And we see the energy counter again. And sure enough, he's able to create this case of strawberry ripple. And he's kind of surprised by it. But one thing that's interesting, while Spawn's focusing on creating this wine, this guy says, "The trick's pulling energy from your costume. It's a neural parasite. And, that doesn't mean you can't borrow a little energy from it. And in return, you can make the wine." So right away, you're like, wait, how does this bum that's living in an alley know anything about this suit? But Spawn, I think, is so distracted by the fact that he made this wine that he doesn't even notice.
And it's worth describing what to the people on the podcast what this bum looks like, because this bum looks like a drunk version of the traditional version of God in my mind, with the long beard and the, you know what I mean, with the green robe. He kind of looks like a drunk former holy person in my mind, or something like that.
Yeah, he is wearing robes. And when Spawn asks him, "Okay, well, who are you?" And he says, "Mister." He goes, "No, Count Nicholas Coglostro, at your service, Mr. Simmons." And despite all this, right, despite everything the guy has said, where he seemingly has all this knowledge of Spawn and Spawn's powers, it never clicks for Al Simmons until the Count calls him Mr. Simmons. And then he's like, "What did you just call me?"
Yeah.
So we stick a pin in that for a second, and we travel across the city to a building where we see Angela in present time, and she meets up with somebody named Miss Gabriel, who apparently is also an angel of some sort. And Angela has apparently mistreated in the past, but this woman is now in charge of the whole world. The whole world is her region of responsibility, since Rafaela was called upstairs. Raffaella was called upstairs, another angel.
She's the
And so Angela,
director of Terran Affairs.
yeah. So basically, what that means is she's in charge of the battles between heaven and hell that occur on Earth.
Yeah.
And so Angela says, well, check it out. I have a hunting permit. There's a new hellspawn. And Gabrielle's like, okay, but do it quickly and quietly. Last thing I need is a big trail of nonsense. So you want to hunt here, you want to hunt this new hellspawn, and just make sure it's quick and clean. Meanwhile, Spawn's confronting the Count back in the alley. He's got him lifted up by the lapels, saying, I want to know how you know I was Al Simmons. And Cagliostro says, well, geez, kid, you're not really very bright, are you? I mean, I knew about your costume. I knew about this. I knew about Malabolgia. But it wasn't until I said your name that you understood who that I was somebody important. And he talks about, yeah, I know the guy you did the deal with. And Spawn's like, okay, I did a deal with the devil. So, what do you know? And Caligula's like, you made a deal with the devil, but did you ever stop to think about which devil? And Spawn's like, what do you mean? There's only one devil. And Cagliostro's like, man, again, you got a lot to learn, kid. He keeps calling him kid, which I love. It really, it really kind of sets their relationship up. And Cagliostro even says, half the people in this alley made a deal with the devil at some point. They ask for power or wealth or fame or, whatever. But look, Sonny, there's a lot you don't understand about what's happening to you. And it seems like Cagliostro may be willing to sort of educate Spawn. But before he gets a chance to, somebody taps on Spawn's back, and it's Angela. She's found him pretty quickly. And she even indicates part of the reason, because Spawn's like, who are you? What do you want? I'm really busy. I got a lot on my mind. Angela's like, yeah, that's how I was able to get this close without you realizing what I was doing. So they have a battle, and it doesn't necessarily seem like things are going Spawn's way. It almost looks like he's sort of disintegrated at some point, and he's sort of hiding in his cape. His cape looks like it's liquefied. Angela dives in there after him, but once inside the cape, inside that dark world in there, it looks like Al Simmons has the upper hand, and he starts choking Angela, and she's begging to be let go, and he does release her, and at that point she stops fighting and just flees completely. She shoots up out of the cape in a big giant ball of light. The guys in the alley like saying, "Whoa!" And even Cagliostro himself is pretty impressed. He says, wow, you don't often see an angel take off like a bat out of hell, laughing at his own pun. And Spawn's like, wait, that was an angel? Why is she trying to kill me? Because he's still stuck in the angels are good and heroic and, kind of the traditional Western Christianity sort of thing. And Cagliostro again says, look, there's a lot you don't know. And Spawn starts picking up her lance. And again, remember, early on when we saw Angela in Ancient Times fighting against the medieval Spawn, it talked about how important that lance was, and that was the weapon that could, lance hellspawn like a, lance excise the pus from this world. So Cagliostro's like, don't touch that, dude, don't put it down. But Spawn, being curious and trying to understand things, like, but what is it? What does it do? It's almost like by telling him not to touch it, you've made him more curious. He's like, look, there's some kind of button, and he presses the button. I gotta say that's a little. That may be a little bit of a bridge too far for me. I mean, Al Simmons, an experienced operator, you don't go pushing buttons on weapons that you don't recognize that are foreign to you, but
Yeah.
he does for whatever reason. And as he kind of zaps out of existence, Cagliostro's like, I said don't. And they're like, oh, well, I guess it's too late. I did say you were a good kid, but not a very bright one. And we see this kind of puff of green smoke go floating off. And we see the energy counter for Spawn, and it's not even at zeros; it's dashes, as if he no longer even exists. So Cagliostro's like, "Well, I'm out of here. Let me grab my strawberry ripple wine." It's kind of a pity because that Al Simmons, he showed some potential. He could have been the one. He could have been a contender, but yeah, who knows where he's gotten to. So I sort of feel like this is. Granted, a little bit in issue 7 to 8 in terms of Spawn needing to get some weaponry to take on overt kill, but we kind of had an ending between their fight, and Overkill thought Spawn was dead. So I feel like this is the first issue where we really got somewhat of a cliffhanger, where it's really like, oh, I want to know what happens next. I want to pick up and read issue 10 because we know Spawn's not really gone, but what happened? You know, what were the consequences of him pushing that button? Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it's fantastic. Again, I'm always going to have that question until I get a chance to talk to Todd about, you know, how many of these ideas. Obviously, Gaiman wrote it, just like Alan Moore wrote the last one. They scripted the issues respectively. But how much input did Todd have in terms of, you know, hey, I want to make sure it's understood that there are other spawns. You know, there have been hellspawns from before. There will be hellspawns in the future. Al Simmons is just one of many. Obviously, Gaiman created Angela himself, and Medieval Spawn, probably his idea. Cagliostro as well. Uh, but yeah, I mean, it's a it's a really great example of how much story you can pack into one issue, because a lot happens in this issue, especially when you compare it to some of those early issues where very little happened. So again, just the difference between a veteran writer like a Neil Gaiman or an Alan Moore versus a kind of a younger writer, somebody who doesn't have as much experience writing, like Todd McFarlane. So not to say McFarlane doesn't have good ideas, but writing comic scripts and scripting them and putting the vocabulary in their mouths and having them talk to other characters and having it seem natural, it's definitely a skill. Not everybody can do it. So I love this issue. I thought it was fantastic. I don't know what it says that my favorite two issues that we've read so far are 8 and 9, the two issues that McFarlane didn't write. Kind of interesting.
Well, you couldn't get two better guys of Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman. Especially Neil Gaiman is well known for crafting tales of mythology. He's probably one of the arguably the best in the business, and not just well, of course, he's the creator of Sandman, so the guy's a master at it. And I mean, Angela here, it's a great character. In the previous issue with Alan Moore, we learned about the various the 10 levels of hell, or the 10 spheres of hell. You know, and I'm always reminded of all those expressions. I'm going to send you to the ninth level of hell, the eighth level of hell. I guess you got different spheres of hell, and here Gaiman builds on that by having this Colostrio, this kind of bum, you know, almost treat Al Simmons like he's an idiot, saying there's so much you don't know. You don't even know that there's more than one devil. Well, we're assuming, because we're inferring from the previous issue, that for each sphere of hell, there's maybe a different devil, or there's a different lieutenant, or we got a Violator and we got the Vindicator. You and I even mixed those names up last issue, and then we corrected ourselves. So it's building a mythology here. Gaiman's building it up, and whether it was by accident or by design, between McFarlane's first 7 issues, then 8 with Alan Moore, and 9th here with Neil Gaiman, this feels actually fairly consistent. There was a lot of exposition heavy in those first 7 issues, and then 8 and 9 in the last 2 with between Moore and Gaiman, where this is really building up the lore. And it's amazing to me, like this issue 9 is probably next, other than perhaps the first issue. In fact, I would say issue 9 here on the speculator market, for at least for more than a few decades, was always worth more than issue 1, because it was the first appearance of Angela. And I have in front of me here the action figure back in the day I bought right from the comic shop. I can tell you that this spear that Angela has in the comic book, the one that Al Simmons touches, that of course sends him to, I'm not sure where it sends him to, but we'll have to wait the next issue. But I can tell you that the toy here is actually quite impressive. This sphere, even after all this time, this is 30 years old. I can push a button on this thing, and the top shoots off real quick. It still has a lot of oomph to it. So this is a hell of a toy. It's built like a brick shithouse. This toy, hard plastic, but at least probably 6 or 7 points of articulation. It was McFarlane's toys at the beginning, but still very well put together action figure. It stood the test of time. I'm never going to sell this on eBay, because I still occasionally play with it.
I'm looking right now. I'm curious how much a vintage Angela.
I think it's probably $50-$60. I would think, maybe. I don't know. I don't know.
Here's one in a box.
Well, I don't have the box.
It's like, well, this isn't really. So this says Angela supersized ultra action figure, 1995. The box is quite yellowed, and it's 30 bucks.
$30. Oh, there you go. So, but it's I mean, these things were just everywhere back in the day. But
Oh
it's
yeah.
I tell you, it's still pretty good. It stands the test of time. They don't make toys or action figures like they used to. But no, I enjoyed this. Angela's she's basically an immortal character, been around for 800 years. She fought the medieval Spawn. I found it interesting how medieval Spawn was very easy to defeat. I thought that was kind of curious. Um, I'm the questions I have reading this. I'm curious as to what power the Spawn's cape has. She falls into his cape, and to have Angela sort of lose her powers, and she almost begged for her life, and she was terrified when she was sort of swallowed into Spawn's cape. I'm not really sure why that is. So she underestimated Spawn. I'm surprised she would fall into the cape like that. Like you would think after 800 years experience, she would have some more experience knowing how to avoid a hellspawn cape. But apparently not. And obviously, Al Simmons found out the hard way what happens when you touch one of the spears of an angel. But yeah, interesting issue. The high point, so for me, I thought there was a lot of humor between just his relationship with the street people who told him about the cops investigating, asking questions about him. They're all protecting him. All of them have their own deal with the devil, as Colostrio, the one bum said. And the way Colostrio uses Al Simmons to Spawn to create for himself some wine so he can continue to feed his alcoholic habit. This is good. This had humor. This built on the mythology, and this is a comic book that we can now definitively say this has stood the test of time. This has always remained on the speculator market for the last 30 years. So I mean, say what you will, whether you like this issue or not. I mean, and you and I both like it. This is a classic issue, and it has stood the test of time. And heck, it even contributed to some legal history in terms of the what it said about creator-owned work in a lawsuit between McFarlane and Gaiman.
Yeah, really, really interesting when you think about it. I know some of the stuff's been retconned out, and I wonder, like, I don't think it's in. I mean, there must be. I mean, there's a digital edition, but it was probably from before the lawsuit, maybe. So, not sure how if Marvel owns Angela now. I mean, is he able to still, print this comic? Maybe the character's called something else, looks differently. I don't know, but I have to do some research on that when I get a chance. But yeah, great issue. Like I said, best cliffhanger, or maybe the first true cliffhanger that we've had in the whole series. So I'm excited. I don't remember a damn thing about issue 10, other than I know the cover has Cerebus on it, and I remember it always stood out because part of the cover's in color and part of it's in black and white.
Well, I should say something, Chase, about issue 10. I bought the digital, the second digital trade of Spawn, and
Yep.
issue 10 is not included in it. And I think it's for copyright reasons. So I'll have to find another way to read issue 10. I actually own issue 10. I think I have it in a storage box somewhere, but
Yeah.
it's not included in the digital edition. It goes from issue 9 to issue 11. And that must be for some copyright reason.
Yeah.
But
Maybe McFarlane's maybe his rights to use Cerebus expired. The other
yeah.
thing about issue 10, um, like I said, I don't remember anything about it, but I'm flipping through it right now. Um, there's a scene where a bunch of people are imprisoned, and
Yeah.
it's only their arms. And now that I'm flipping through it, I remember this. It's a very well known image by McFarlane, but
Uh-huh.
their arms are sticking out of this cage that they're in, and they're clearly recognizable. You got Hulk, you got Shazam, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green
Oh,
Lantern,
maybe that's why.
Wolverine, Venom, Spider-Man, Superman, Thor, Juggernaut, Flash, Thing, Joker. So I wonder if that might have anything to do with it. But again, we'll have to wait and see. As I said, written by Dave Sim, and be sure you tune in tomorrow when we cover issue 10 because yeah, it looks good. It's been a long time since I've read it. So, anything else to add about issue 9 before we wrap it up, Rocky?
No, I just, I'm just, I'm glad I actually got to go into my garage. I've got like 3 boxes of old action figures and my to bring out Angela again. It was just, puts a big smile on my face. So, I enjoyed this
Yeah, nothing wrong
sometimes.
with that. So don't forget, everybody, if you're checking us out on YouTube, be sure you head over to your favorite podcasting app or platform and do a search for the Comic Source and subscribe so you don't miss any of our audio only content. If you are a subscriber of the podcast already, be sure you also head over to YouTube, do a search for Rocky's channel. It's Comic Boom, Comic Space Boom, exclamation point. Subscribe to his channel. He does other stuff other than just collaborate with me. He talks about his extensive collection, shows it off, does reviews and whatnot, as well as teaming up with other people at various times. So be sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of his content. Ring that notification bell, like this video. All of that really helps us and our reach. So holiday season, we hope you're all enjoying it. Hope you're having a great time spending time with friends and family, whatever you celebrate. We hope you're making the most of it. So that's going to do it for this episode. We appreciate the support as always, and we'll talk to you next time.
Merry Spawnmas!